is host javelin, but there's still a very low number of states that contest the hammer throw. So a lot of people aren't even used to seeing the hammer throw. And then in the NCAA, I don't know what the history is of how the weight throw came to be in the sense of in the NCAA, but it's pretty much the indoor version of hammer throw. Outdoor hammer throw, you throw a 16-pound ball. It's attached to a wire and a handle, where the indoor version of it is basically a handle attached to a swivel, attached to a 35-pound ball.
Right.
So thrown exactly the same technically. Definitely a challenge when you're talking about, pick up a weight plate and try to throw that as far as you possibly can.
Right.
Obviously the history's out of the Highland Games, but they kind of changed it into a training implement is what a lot of the other countries outside of the U.S. use it for the hammer throw, but they contested in the NCAA.
Obviously, eventually, your best event would be the javelin. Do you end up having to winnow down what you do with the other enterprises and just throw javelin, or do you continue to do the others?
During my time at KU, I was willing to do whatever it took for our team to be good. So through the indoor season, I threw both shot put and the weight throw. During the outdoor season, I threw all four of the outdoor throws: shot put, discus, hammer throw, and javelin. So it was really, for me, it was like, okay, how do I help our team be successful? And if I could score points in it, I was going to try to do it. Eventually, it came down to my senior year, and the coach, Doug Reynolds, was the coach that I finished my career with at KU, and he's now back. It got down to my final year and my final year of eligibility, and he kind of asked me at the end of the year, he goes, do you want to be good at two events, or do you really want to go try to win two of them? And I said, well, honestly, I want to go win them both in terms of the weight throw and the javelin. So we backed off on shot put that year during the indoor season and really focused in on the indoor weight throw. And then the outdoor season, I say we played discus at meets, so I didn't train it, but we would just continue to throw it at meets to see if I could score points. And eventually we eliminated the hammer throw altogether, so then I could focus on the javelin throw, trying to win the national championship that year.
And you did. You won the national championship in the javelin and the weight toss. That's pretty amazing. And talk about the feeling of taking a national championship. All the best elite athletes are in one place, and you're number one.
Yeah, quite an honor. And, a few of the guys that I kind of came up through the NCAA from other schools behind that were winning them, it was always like, okay, how do I beat these guys, or how do I become the best? And you just focus on the process and try to stay consistent in your training and put trust in the coaches that you work with. And, mentally that year I was a different place. I knew what I was capable of doing in the weight throw, and I ended up setting the NCAA record that year too. And going into nationals, it was me competing against me, trying to beat my national record. And the javelin throw, there were a few other good guys there, and it was just like, okay, let's just try to execute this and finish out the year the right way. And it's a great feeling. I don't think I realized really what I did at the time. I still kind of don't. It's kind of like, you just do what you do. You do the training, right. You try to be your best, and the accolades come behind the work. And, I enjoy competing. I hated losing. So it wasn't necessarily, I liked the feeling of winning, but I really didn't enjoy losing when I did lose.
Now, when you're training for these big, heavy type of events, do you work hard to, put on maybe more weight than you would normally do so if you were like playing football or basketball or whatever? What's the training process like when you're doing?
The training itself is, you're trying to obviously just kind of increase your athleticism and power output, jumping ability, sprinting ability. Because really when it comes down to it, the specificity of the training is, well, yes, the weight room will lead to some better power output, but the reality is you have to throw a 35-pound ball. Mm-hmm. So it comes down to some of the technique, and same thing with the javelin. You got to be good at, sprinting, and you got to be good at bounding, and you have to be able to connect all that to, a 9-foot spear. So it wasn't as much focused on like, well, I have to have this many pounds of body weight, and in fact, a lot of the time I struggled with my own body weight in my training, and trying to just kind of maintain a reasonable weight. But it was more of like the outputs that I was trying to produce in the weight room, and how fast we were moving things, and how far could I throw a ball, or how far could I jump. So it was more about like, how can I increase my athleticism and then transfer that over to the events.
What was your college experience like away from track and field, or was it so all-consuming, what with maybe the academics and that you didn't experience it as much as other people would?
Honestly, I think the track and field and the focus on the training was probably a good thing. Easily could get caught up in the social life of college and end up failing athletically or academically. I feel like I had a pretty good balance in the sense of just all three parts of that. Mm-hmm. I was pretty motivated. I wasn't very motivated academically as a high school student. I just kind of coasted through. I doubted myself quite a bit academically. But when I came down to KU, my dad actually was like, if you don't have at least a 3.0 your first semester, you're coming home. And I was like, I've never had a 3.0 even in high school, and this is college. So I think my dad kind of lighting that fire academically underneath me helped. But then I also realized that what I was doing academically at the time was going to lead me beyond in terms of a career. So it became a game in academics of, okay, what do I have to do to get an A? Because I did not understand what it took in high school to get A's. And
right.
I figured it out collegiately, and I just realized it took a lot of work. So I did put a lot of time into the academics, and obviously the athletics, I wouldn't say it's all consuming, but it's why you're there. It's your job. And that's kind of the way I took it. And honestly, I wanted to be great at what I did, and I wanted to go compete beyond college, and I had friends that were doing that. So I kind of had some good role models, and a couple Canadian throwers. Jason Tunks, he was a discus thrower at SMU, and then Brad Snyder was a Canadian shot putter who was at South Carolina. So those guys were kind of idols of mine growing up, and I had some good leadership in that sense. So I had a bigger picture beyond collegiate athletics, and then just the social life outside of it. There's the occasional house party that you go to, but a lot of it was like spending time with my friends on the track team and hanging out with them and just being with them.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Hey Kansas City, Joe Spiker, Easton Roofing, back for another beautiful springtime in Kansas City. We are proud to announce our renewed partnership with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Kansas City. Starting in 2024, a portion of every job sold will be donated to a cause close to my heart. I was a big, and I encourage you to volunteer. And if you hire us for service on your residential or commercial roof, you'll know that a portion of the profits will go to a great cause. So call us at 913-257-5426. Easton Roofing. Integrity matters.
We're here at the 23rd Street Brewery with Matt Llewellyn. And Matt, basketball's over, football's still a few months away, but there's always fun to be had at the 23rd Street Brewery.
Absolutely. We've always got something going on here. The games are always going on. It's a great place to come enjoy everything out on the patio. Beautiful scenery out there. Great beer. I've got a great brewer, great food. It's always fun here at the brewery.
And the atmosphere is great and friendly and warm, too.
We always want to make sure you're a lot happier when you leave than you were when you came in.
Always fun here at the 23rd Street Brewery at 23rd and Castle. Make sure to come by when you're in Lawrence.
If you'd like to join these and other fine sponsors and market your business on Kansas City's #1 rated podcast, contact us at Danny@DannyKlinkscale.com. Look forward to working with you.
Our guest is Scott Russell. He's a multiple national champion while at KU and a Canadian Olympian, and we'll get to that as the Olympics are about to roll out as well, and now is into teaching, and we'll get to all of that as we continue on. Now, the transition, track and field, especially in the weight events and javelin and things like that, is usually an older guy type of thing. People don't peak generally during their college years. generally, and that is the case as well. So after graduation, you're going to pursue the life of a professional athlete, but this isn't like, you win the national championship or you excelled like you did in another sport. You'd be a number one draft choice and you get a contract and things like that. You get out of college and you got to do it yourself.
Yeah, it's a total different beast, and there's a lot of push right now in track and field to legitimize professional track and field. And coming out my first year out of college in 2003 and trying to do it full-time professional, I didn't realize, or I didn't know how to train as a professional. Like, I should have been doing not necessarily a lot more work, but just spreading the work out throughout the day and doing multiple training sessions. So it was a challenge at first. And then eventually I ended up picking up a job working at a physical therapy clinic. And then I was working most of the day, then training in the evenings. So it was a very difficult balance coming out of my undergrad and then going into trying to be a professional. But like, how do you support yourself financially? Well, I need a job now. So it's just totally different. Whereas your other sports, like you said, you're walking out and you're almost an instant millionaire. Shoot, if you're a major league athlete in just about any sport, you're making league minimums of a couple $100,000 as opposed to, living on like $14,000 a year, which was one of the years that I competed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at the very highest level, maybe in another different enterprises as well, like the sprints or whatever, or maybe the money professionally is better. There was some funding from Athletics Canada, but it wasn't consistent and it wasn't great, right?
Yeah, our governing body, Athletics Canada, and through the Canadian Olympic Committee, they had a funding system or a grant system where we generally got some money. By the time I converted it to US dollars, it pretty much equated to about $1,200 a month. And that's kind of what I was training on that first year, just trying to stay afloat, literally. But then, like I said, I had to pick up a job and, trying to balance it all. It's a lot. And, you really want to push yourself as a professional and do things the right way, but it's difficult because you don't have the funding.
Right.
And, a lot of the times it was like, okay, am I going to have my funding next year? Did I do enough to have them continue to support me? And there were a couple of years where my funding got withdrawn and all I was living on was what I was making through the physical therapy clinic that I worked for. And like I said, like that, there was one year where I lived on $14,000. So here you are as a professional quote unquote athlete, living way below the poverty line. And you're like, why am I doing this at times?
Right. Now, give us an idea. If you were in a fairly big meet in Europe or something and you won the javelin, what do you win?
When I first got into it, some of the Golden League meets, which now are called Diamond Leagues,
right?
If you win one of the Diamond League meets back in like the early 2000s, you might get somewhere between $5,000 and $8,000. I really struggled when I went overseas as a younger athlete. I kind of didn't. I didn't have a lot of mentorship in terms of how to travel and how to compete over in Europe. So there was a lot of high-end stress when you're going over there. You're traveling by yourself. Some of the high-end like athletes and sprinters are like, oh, okay, I have my massage therapist and my physio and my coach travels with me, where I literally was like, all right, Doug, heading over to Europe for 2 weeks. It was like, good luck.
Right.
So it was kind of like you're kind of on your own trying to figure it out. And, hindsight now, it's like you have so much more vision of how the past could have been now. And you would make changes, but, you don't get that chance. So you hopefully provide those opportunities for the own athletes you get to work with along the time if you continue to coach.
Well, you continued to excel. You won national championships in Canada. Yeah, you won the Kansas Relays 9 times in 12 years. That's unbelievable. So there were low moments, certainly. I know around 2005 or so, you maybe had the thoughts of maybe hanging it up, and you didn't. What got you through that period?
Yeah, so 2000. What happened was in 2004. Doug Reynolds, who was my coach here, he was trying to get me ready if he had to leave Kansas for any reason. And he said, well, you need to start writing your own training now. So the Olympic year in 2004 was the first year I started to write my own training. He kind of mentored me through that. And it was a real struggle. I had a down year in 2004 and didn't qualify for the Olympic team. The previous year,